Welcome back to AM Agenda with me here in the Canberra studio. The Shadow Finance Minister, Senator Helen Coonan, the Small Business Minister, Craig Emerson. We left the break talking about the economy, went to the break talking about the economy. I want to talk now about the behaviour in question time. Tony Abbott says, well, is not, rejecting the idea of boycotting question time now if the government, as he says, continues to abuse question time. What do you make of Tony Abbott's antics over the last day?
Well, look, I think clearly I wasn't in the House question time, being in the Senate question time, but both question times I think have become characterised by very long, robotic, drawn-out answers to questions that really don't provide a response. And I think this must have been just a level of frustration that Tony felt that got him to a point where he just found it very difficult to continue to listen. It is an abuse of question time to not deal with the question and to just endlessly lecture everyone. I understand, obviously Craig's there, but I understand it goes on sometimes for up to 2 hours. Now that I don't think's ever happened in question time. I may be wrong about that, but it's clearly not what question time is meant to do. Question time is meant to be an opportunity to elicit answers from the government, from ministers, and not to get a lecture around the world about everything happening and not answering the actual question. So the repetition, the robotic answers, the formulaic response, I think is something that we all need to address as to how our question times are running. We've tried something new in the Senate. I don't think it's working that much better, but we've got limited times, and so mercifully, we get through it in an hour or so.
Craig, the Prime Minister's, you wouldn't use the word pithy to describe his answers in question time, would you?
Well, let me go to Tony Abbott first. Tony Abbott is the Liberal Party's Gordon Ramsay, except he can't cook. He's belligerent, he's abusive. Our economy was on the road to recovery. I thought Tony Abbott was on the road to recovery, but he's regressed. He's back to where he was several years ago.
Oh, good.
It is on the road to recovery. It's just a long road to recovery.
You just don't know how far it's recovered, right?
Well, it certainly hasn't recovered to the extent of ripping out the supports from the stimulus.
You wouldn't even know that.
That's the point. Tony Abbott is the Gordon Ramsay of the Liberal Party. He's got a foul mouth, and there's no excuse and no substitute for developing good policy and articulating good policy. Now, I don't know to this day what the coalition stands for other than a return to work choices, other than pulling out the stimulus. It's a very negative.
On question time, Julia Gillard, when she was in opposition, called for limits to ministerial answers, and yet the Prime Minister yesterday in his first answer went well over 10 minutes.
Well, it was actually a question about the very issues that we're talking about. 1 year on from the collapse of Lehman Brothers, the global financial crisis.
Aren't there other mechanisms, prime ministerial statements, ministerial statements?
That warranted a reasonably comprehensive answer. I mean, you can't just throw a couple of 15-second grabs for the television set when you're answering a question about the deepest global recession since the Great Depression, the causes of and the solutions to, about which, as you've seen here again today, we profoundly disagree with the coalition.
Okay. A few other issues I want to get to. The next one is on coalition women in Parliament. There are stories today, an analysis done in the Sydney Morning Herald that says coalition women in the House of Representatives are not getting anywhere near the number of questions as the men do. This is about whether or not the women in the coalition are being utilised to the best of their ability. Are you concerned by that?
Well, look, I'm not sure what the contrary position was when Labor was in opposition, but it certainly is the case, as I've discovered, having had 12 years in government and now some time in opposition, that it is a very different focus for the leaders in opposition, because usually the strategy and the questions, the case that's being contested, is being put through the leaders. That is, the leader, the deputy leader, perhaps the front bencher, and perhaps the leader of government business, a manager of government business. So I don't find that in itself to be remarkable. I think that's probably the way in which an opposition hones
So
its
you're not
particular
worried,
attack.
you're not worried about it?
Not in terms of how we treat our women, because we do use women very extensively right across all of our party system, in our committee system. Nobody's complaining to me about that, and I think I'd probably be the recipient of a complaint if there was a genuine concern that people are trying to get a question up and can't. I think a lot of backbenchers are feeling that particular issue, whether they're male or female.
Well, someone who is complaining is Julie Bishop. When we had a modest reshuffle, she said there weren't enough women on the Labor front bench. There's 7 women on the Labor front bench, and in opposition, to pick up Helen's point, women like Julia Gillard, Jenny Macklin, Penny Wong were very important in taking the attack up to the coalition when the coalition was in government. The fact is, I mean, to the extent that Wilson Tuckey seems to control the Tactics Committee and the attitudes of people like Wilson Tuckey is just appalling.
You make an interesting point.
Yesterday, when Tanya
But
Flitter said,
it's obviously not universal within the
listen,
coalition.
I wonder
I'm sure that Helen supports the role of women in politics. I don't believe Wilson Tuckey is, and I don't believe on the evidence with the number of questions that are being asked by the blokes on the coalition side and the very, very few. And remember, that's even inflated by Julie Bishop's asking questions when she was Shadow Treasurer. Now she's Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister. That's dropped away dramatically too.
How many questions? We're talking about backbenchers here. We're not talking about front bench.
The story is about front bench women who did not get a chance.
My point was about backbenchers and whether they're male or female. Let's not get too hung up.
Well, you changed the subject.
No, I haven't changed the subject. How many questions has Julia Irwin had?
Okay, let's use that.
She's had more questions than most women.
I want to use that. I want to use that as a segue to
She's
the
actually
comments.
had more questions than most women on the backbench.
How many?
Let me interject, please.
2, 3, 4.
2, 3, 4.
Julia Irwin last night had some comments
Hold
about.
on, Sophie Mirabella on the front bench said 2.
Let's move on. Julia Irwin last night had some comments about the factional system within the party in her seat of Fowler. What do you make of it? Is this a parting shot at the party that's looked after her for many years?
Oh, Julia's entitled to her opinion. She is retiring at the next election. She's obviously had some observations about the operation of the party and her electorate. I'm no expert on, the electorate of Fowler, so I don't really have any further comment to enlighten you with.
But she also had a slap at the budget. She says that it had the wrong priorities, and she was critical of the Labor Party move to raise the pension age as well. So it was right. It was a broad-ranging parting shot.
Well, indeed. And what I'm saying, indeed, she's entitled to have her view. She's expressed her view as a backbencher. That's part of our democracy. It stands out at the moment,
doesn't it? Because most of the backbench, there's an iron discipline within Labor at the moment. The Prime Minister is governing over a fairly disciplined backbench. You don't see many renegades like this.
Oh, well, I think it is a reasonably disciplined show, and if I might say, stands in stark contrast to the party room and the coalition, where they've obviously decided to bring back the biff.
Just 20 seconds.
Well, there are like a lot of cyborgs in the Labor Party. Much as I'm fond of my mate here, he parrots the line too, and if you step out of line in Labor, you're dead. At least in the Liberal Party, we allow people to be living, breathing human beings who occasionally differ.
Well, it's great. I'm glad to have this living, breathing human being, and yourself too, Craig.
And they're still trying to find Warren Truss, speaking of invisible people.
Okay, well, nice to see you both. That's all for the program today. Join David Spears 4:15 this afternoon for PM Agenda. I'm Kieran. Gilbert, thanks for your company.